are you guys? Good? Great. So great to see everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm, like Peter said, I'm Jeff Molesky. I'm with Coherency. Thrilled to be here with Debbie Pomerantz, who is SVP of Research for TLC and Own and Discovery. And what we've scheduled to do today is really dig into the TLC emotional taxonomy case study. And what we thought we'd do is, just for those of you who aren't familiar with Coherency and our approach, just spend 3 minutes on our methodology, just so you're grounded in what it was that we actually used and applied to the study. We'll give you a better feel in terms of there were 3 phases in terms of the study design, but the main event is really to hear from Debbie in terms of the learnings and even how you're starting to action the learnings across the network. All right, sound good? Terrific. So Coherency, we are a marketing insights and strategy firm. Our specialty is emotion. So we use breakthrough research methodologies to really help brands or networks decipher the emotional and rational logic that drives consumer or viewer behavior. So we say, in other words, we're helping brands, we're helping networks connect the heart and the mind of their consumer. Key methodology that we leverage, which is what we use for this study, is called LOVEQUOTIENT. And this is really our roadmap to getting to that emotional and rational understanding. It's a proprietary system, and it helps quantify and deepen the emotional connection that viewers have with networks or series. And it was developed by former marketing scientists from eHarmony. So it's based on the fundamentals of relationship science and leverages neuromarketing to really utilize what we call a compatibility matching algorithm to define how, in fact, we can deepen the affinity between brands and consumers. What you're looking at up here, I know it might take you back to your high school days in science class, those periodic tables. It's not that. This is just a depiction of how we actually take pretty diagnostic approach to the different components that really roll up to a LOVEQUOTIENT composite score. And the 3 components below that are chemistry, needs fulfillment, and compatibility. And in order to really deepen a relationship, whether that's at a human to human level or human to brand level, each one of those components exist. And we want to make sure that we're aware of them and we really spend time on each one because they're all important in different ways. Chemistry is that intangible attraction, right? So think about when you first meet somebody, you see somebody across the room and there is an attraction, you really can't put your finger on it. That same experience exists with consumers and series, consumers and networks, consumers and brands. Needs fulfillment is about the emotional and rational needs fulfillment. So are you satisfying my needs, both rationally and emotionally? And then the last one over here on the right is compatibility, which gets to the personality traits, the values, and the principles that are shared between those in a relationship. Okay, and this will come more to life when we share the case study, but it'll at least give you the framework that we used in terms of the system. The methodology can be applied and is being applied to solve for a number of business issues. So when you think about really helping solve for the different strategies, I'll just touch on each one. LOVEQUOTIENT brand is around assessing, refining, and then even monitoring the network brand equity and series alignment. LOVEQUOTIENT viewer is what we leverage to surface the attitudes and the motivations and the need states and even segment within your viewer audience. LOVEQUOTIENT communication is what we use to help inform and optimize both marketing and promotional communication. And then on the bottom, you see LOVEQUOTIENT series, which helps identify really the key elements of success for pilots, for series maintenance, and even future development. And then the last one is advertiser. LOVEQUOTIENT advertiser, which is what we use to really quantify the relationship between viewers, content, and advertiser brands to shape a story that can be taken out to the marketplace. For the TLC emotional taxonomy study, we leveraged brand and viewer. So those were the 2 modules that we really used for the design of this study. So with that, I want to talk to Debbie. Hi, Debbie.
Hi.
So, Debbie, can you start? I mean, just so people have, I think, more of the business context, right, in terms of when we came together and really started to explore what you were trying to solve for. Can you talk a little about the catalyst, right, in terms of the overriding need within TLC for this type of research?
Sure. I mean, I think overall, one of the things we were really seeing and therefore trying to answer was when we look at our schedule, we had kind of fallen into the trap of scheduling by category, right? We had shows that fell into kind of very specific buckets, whether it was multiples or little people or transformational programming, and we were kind of scheduling that way. And in doing that a little bit, one of the things that we were really seeing was that we were not able to bring viewers kind of across as many nights as we might otherwise have wanted, because people were coming in to watch kind of very specific categories. And in a world, I think, where we all need to be more dependent because of our budgets on being able to promote to our own audiences, we didn't really know what we were wasting. If we were promoting Tuesday night shows on Saturday nights, those Saturday night viewers weren't really watching Tuesday night shows. So we really wanted to kind of find a different, potentially more creative way to think about scheduling the network in an effort to really bring viewers across more nights with more frequency. And that's really kind of what the catalyst of this project was.
And what was it? I mean, you think about the approach, because you guys probably could have cut that, skinned it a number of different ways, right? What was it about this approach, right, that was most appealing to you?
So I think for us, look, when you think about TLC, and I know everybody in this room watches TLC with great regularity, it's really kind of hashtag all the feels, right? As a network, we really kind of deliver on the range of human emotions. And on any given night during the week, you can feel happy, inspired, curious, sad, disgusted in a good way, whatever you're watching. And so the idea of doing any project, quite frankly, based on emotion feels very, very organic to us. And so when I talked to Jeff and Steve about ways to do this, they were really, quite frankly, one of the first people I went to. I've worked with them before. And so I knew what their process was. And it seemed a no-brainer to me, honestly, and really a much more creative way to think about scheduling our network. If we can look at programs based on the way people are literally feeling when they're watching them, I felt that we would find kind of different partnerships between some of the programs in terms of the way we're currently doing them, and potentially allow us to take, for example, a Saturday night show, something that has historically aired on Saturday nights for a variety of reasons, and put it on a Tuesday night, thereby bringing some of those viewers over across other nights of the network.
Great, terrific. So, as you know, we had a three-phased approach in terms of how we created the design. We were really looking to how do we explore, quantify, and dimensionalize these key elements required to both develop and then articulate the TLC programming clusters in viewer need state. So the first phase, I'm just going to touch on these quickly, and then Debbie, I'd love for you to maybe talk about the value, right? But this is what we really created in a shared way, Peter. It was a shared experience in terms of how we created this design with TLC. And it was really, let's start with phase one, was all around getting to the viewer need state exploration. So we had, it was 17 in-depth interviews that we actually did online. We did over Skype. And it was really to help examine what their weekly viewing habits were. And identify a broad range of emotional need states that were being satisfied by various programming. So we wanted to really start wide before we then went into the quantitative component, which was phase two, which is what we call the viewer need state mapping. And this was a large-scale quantitative study designed to really better understand the viewer and to statistically model and cluster programming around the various need states. And then the last phase was a qualitative component that was about refinement and the articulation. So this is where we really wanted to gain a more nuanced understanding of the need states and the meaning behind them with the heavy viewers. So each phase had a slightly different purpose. And again, I'd love to hear from you, Debbie, or maybe share what was the value that you really got from the different phases or any of the phases?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of the data that came out of this. And I thought every phase was very valuable. I'm a huge fan when I do any study. I always try to do quant and qual, because I think, both of those together, you're really going to get all the information that you need. I tend to favor the qual piece. And so for me, when we really talked about this last qual piece was kind of workshopping with the people who were in the study, and really asking them to create videos and collages about how they were feeling and what they were thinking when they were watching our programming. And the data that we got back was so robust. You know, to hear somebody who's watching a Cake Boss and a Sister Wives, how they feel about the different shows, and know that they recorded that while they were actually watching. So it wasn't, let me think about how I felt about this last week. It's in that moment, how do I feel? I thought that that was really powerful and really gave us a very, very kind of defined, robust picture of these viewers and their need states from an emotional perspective.
Great. So let's talk a little more about some of the key learnings, right? And I think it would be great maybe to start with what the study validated and really surfaced about this viewer.
Yeah, and I know as researchers, it's always great when you pay for data and it validates what you already know, right? So there was a lot of that going on here, which tremendous value in that. And I think for us internally, it really gave us a more nuanced, kind of open-minded way to really talk about our viewers. Historically, we really kind of spoke about our viewer a little bit as this middle America, somewhat conservative, housewife type of woman, which is all good, except we kind of knew already that she was evolving past this. And when we got this data, it was really very, very clear and gave us the language to really speak about how she was evolving past this. And this idea of her being an empathic life explorer. And we knew that from things we had already heard and the types of programming, obviously, that's on our network and that she's watching, but to kind of define this idea that she is somebody who is curious and almost a Renaissance woman. And while, yes, she cares very deeply about her family, she also has tons of passions that are outside the household. So while she might be more conservative in thought and values, she's a little bit less conservative in action. She might be sitting down to have dinner with her family every night. She might not necessarily work outside of the home, but she cares deeply about what's going on in the outside world and is very, very curious and is looking for windows to get into that outside world, because she isn't necessarily always kind of able to get out there herself. So from the perspective of what she's really getting from TLC, that idea of us being able to kind of open windows into worlds she wouldn't necessarily otherwise see, and really wants to discover, that idea of discovery, that came out here very, very clearly. And specifically this idea that she cares very, very deeply not only about herself and her family, but about everybody else around her from that empathic perspective, I think was very, very prevalent throughout the study, quite frankly.
Yeah. I mean, it validated a lot. What would you say was, one or two of your biggest surprises about her?
One or two of my biggest surprises about her. I have to be honest, I don't know that there were. I think it was really the validation piece that was the strongest, and we had found kind of snippets of it in other things that we were doing, but the methodology of this, of looking at heavy viewers of every single one of our programs individually, so it wasn't heavy viewers of the network per se, it was heavy viewers of each of these programs, and for all of these viewers to kind of share these characteristics, I think that was probably, I don't want to use the word surprising, but very, very fantastic and pleasing to really know that this is all of our viewers. So even though we ended up kind of segmenting, obviously, based on the programs, this idea that there was really kind of one person watching across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you, I think this next slide helps it, but when you think about the composition of TLC programming, can you share a little about what you learned?
So this was really great because obviously we're not able to show all of it here, but what we really came out with was literally a roadmap to developing our programming, quite frankly. Really, I think that there, at the end of the day, were 8 pieces that our viewers were able to really define what drives viewing to our programming, and what they need from us and what makes a successful show. And obviously there are so many components that go into what makes a show successful outside of just these 8 pieces, including execution and scheduling. But I think that from a development perspective has really been kind of the biggest piece, because it not only helps us moving forward, but also we can go back and look at some of the shows that might not have delivered the way we expected them to, and really kind of, this has really been able to help us pinpoint to a certain extent why. So that's been really meaningful. This idea of, again, profound empathy. are viewers really able to connect with the things that they're seeing on screen because it's super relatable. They're able to put themselves in that person's position. This is something that we've heard continually, but again, to see it here was extremely validating. And then this idea of anthropological insight, which has been really key, and so much of this has really been about helping us create the verbiage around a lot of what we already knew, but weren't necessarily expressing it in the same way that Jeff and Steve have done so beautifully. And so, when our viewers watch our shows from an anthropological perspective, what are they expecting, what do they need? And it's this idea of extraordinary people living extraordinary lives, ordinary people living extraordinary lives, extraordinary people living ordinary lives. And these three pieces, if you think about all of our programming, it's very defined in the characters that we have on our show. So that also, I use that in development meetings now. It's like, this is where we are, we have to remember this. So I think that that's been really helpful in getting me to put the kibosh on shows.
Great. What, as you think about the various need states, right? I mean, that we really were able to surface and hone in on, how did programming start to deliver against those?
So this was really interesting. Again, not real data up here, but, and again, pieces of this were validating because we know, and that's kind of where this all started, that we do have certain categories or even one or two specific shows that are really islands unto themselves, right? That people are coming in to watch that show and not watching anything else on the network. And so we really saw that when we broke out this map this way, that we had, a cluster that had literally one current show. It had two shows, one that's no longer really on the air. So it had one current show on there, on it. And so the question is, when you look at something like this, okay, so we have that one show. This one show happens to be very highly rated, a lot of hours on the network, right? So do we try to kind of remarket or reinvent that show to a certain extent so we move it into one of these other clusters that have more programs in it? Do we develop other programming to that specific cluster so that it has something to pair with? So those are kind of some of the things that we're thinking about now, and a couple of the challenges that this has really started to help us with. That Shock Me category up at the top, I'm sure that everybody is familiar with the 90 Day Fiancé franchise. Thank you very much, exactly. So obviously a show that has done extremely well for us, but we don't have a tremendous amount of programming to partner with it the way it should be, quite frankly, because we don't have a lot of shows that kind of end up in that crazy shock and awe category. So again, how do we get some of those shows that might sit in that stimulate me area that have crossover characteristics, how do we get some of those to move up a little bit so that they're better paired, so that we have better programming to pair with a 90 Day Fiancé. So, there's a lot of that going on. Some of the things we saw that were super, I'll take that back, that were surprising, that we kind of had an inkling about already. We have, our Saturday night shows, the descriptive words of our Saturday night programming, and on a Saturday night we are shows like Say Yes to the Dress, right? And so the words were, these are shows that really make me appreciate life, right? They're happy, they don't require a lot of thought. And so one of the shows that we've historically aired on Saturday night has been what was developed as a home renovation show. But the people who are in the show are this fantastic family that we saw from social media content very early on. People were really relating to this family. So when we did all this, that particular show did not end up grouped with all those other Saturday night shows, which happened to be grouped together. It ended up in a totally different cluster because it's perceived as a family show, and so when people watch it, they're feeling similar emotions to some of our other family shows versus, a Say Yes to the Dress or other home renovation shows we might be airing on Saturday night. So we did see some of those things that were super interesting, shows that may have started as kind of a curiosity that people were watching because there was something going on with that character that was very different from what they were familiar with, and so they were really curious about it. So we've been playing around a little bit with some of our repeat strategies, a little bit in prime, but mostly during the day, to see what kind of learnings we can get from utilizing this information to create different pairings during those time periods. And we don't have a lot of information yet back on that. Hopefully we will over the next couple weeks and months, but we are utilizing it that way. Ad sales, I've met with ad sales and PR and programming and scheduling, obviously, and marketing, and all groups across the board have been very, very excited about the information. I want to just take a second. Part of what I always talk about is some of the language that was used to create some of these clusters, and really that Steve and Jeff did such a great job creating who these groups really are. So one of the clusters was defined as eye-opening access into the hidden hearts, minds, and lives of unfamiliar or deviant cultures and lifestyles that both fascinate and irritate. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but that kind of language has been super, super useful for both marketing and PR and sales and ad sales to a certain extent. Additionally, as Jeff mentioned, we looked at, to create these groups, we looked at 52 different attributes across 16 and then grouped them together into 16 different factors, or
Clusters.
52 attributes into 16 factors, whatever.
Factors,
Anyways, we looked at a lot of information, and we have that information broken down by every single individual show that we looked at. So we have the overall cluster groups identified by these different emotional drivers and emotional benefits and emotional descriptive words. And then we also have that information for each individual show to really see how it all came together. So ad sales is using that information as well for each individual show. And Pam Pierce, who is the head of our ad sales research group, if you feel like speaking more to that, you're welcome to. But I know that they are utilizing that heavily as well. So it's really being used across the organization right now. And hopefully, a year from now, I'll be able to say with much success.
Yeah, that's great. So with that, what's next? If you could set, all right, as we think about really obviously maximizing this investment and where you're headed and what's starting to, mobilize, where would you go next?
So one of the things that we're doing is taking these clusters and fusing them with the Nielsen data. And hopefully that will be able to kind of help us dig even deeper into these 6 different clusters that we came up with, and also to continually be able to look at them in terms of duplication and who the viewers are, et cetera. So I think that will be super helpful as we move forward. And really just really very, very much focusing on the programming and the scheduling piece, since that's really what this was created for, and trying to drive viewers across different nights and make sure that we are promoting to the right people. And we obviously, ratings will be a piece of that, but at the end of the day, on a quarterly basis, what is our duplication looking like night to night? And that's really where we're going to be able to hopefully tell those stories.
Great, terrific. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
So we've got about 5 more minutes. So what questions does anyone have? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, from a programming standpoint, scheduling standpoint, if you found that among these clusters that you covered, there are certain ones that pair together and then sort of counterintuitive working well.
Yeah. So the Saturday night show that I mentioned earlier, based on this, it would be paired very, very closely with a show that's about multiples, which we would never have put together at all. We would never have put that together initially because it was fully developed as a home renovation show. So that's something we're trying. This other show that I mentioned, that's about, initially it was about the curiosity of the character. That can now be paired with shows that are more about, family and support, because it's really become a show about the family as a whole, and also how parents will literally do anything just to support their kid. So there are some differentiations there that we're seeing. And we continue to dig into it and find new insights to really determine what the best pairings are. Can we go back to that cluster slide for a second?
Yeah.
But when we look at, one of the things that we found was that, so for instance, if you look at the Stimulate Me cluster, again, fake names, but if you look at the Stimulate Me cluster, there might be 9 shows in that cluster, but some are going to be at the top and some are going to be at the bottom. So we're able to utilize it that way as well, to say, okay, we might have put show A, which is at the top, with show B at the bottom, because we thought thematically they're the same, but reality is, even though they're in the same cluster, they're worlds apart from each other. So let's instead look at shows that are around show A up there. So those are the types we're seeing, and I think it's really, that thematic part. I know that we all do that. These shows make sense together because they're, the same, they're within the same category. And that's really kind of where we're trying to change our thinking. And this is not an easy thing to do, right? Because we have put ourselves in this boat, quite frankly. But also from a development perspective, okay, so we have shows A and B, and one is a multiple show and one is a show about a family. We might have put those shows together, but as we develop, if we need to develop pairs for those shows, let's think about different ways that people are perceiving them, so that maybe there's a show that might not be quite along the same lines thematically, but from a feeling perspective, people would watch it one on top of another.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of which kind of link, right? There's different links between a few shows. You mentioned feelings, you mentioned the clusters thematically. finding out like which of those are stronger.
For sure. And so that's what I was mentioning before. We have a one page for every single show, which speaks to what are the emotional benefits. What am I literally getting from the show? It shows me worlds that I never would have had access to. How am I feeling when I watch the show? I'm shocked by this show. What are the words I'm using to describe the show? So we have that for every single show. So again, even though they might fall in the same cluster, we can look at it by essentially % of answers to see which ones really match up the most closely. Yeah, hopefully.
Yep.
The genesis of the project, if I said correctly, is about the lack of crossover viewing. Why focus only on heavy viewers when the problem ostensibly would be less salient?
Well, we actually, and that's part of the reason why we were looking to be able to fuse all of that into the Nielsen so that we could break it up further into light, heavy, and medium viewers, but that's a totally fair question. I think that it was really, first of all, wanting to make sure that we were getting the viewers who were fully knowledgeable about the programming, because we didn't want somebody who watched it once and could tell us how they feel when they happen to be watching. We wanted people to be fully engaged with that program and therefore the project. I think that was probably the main reason. And we knew, hopefully, that we would be able to take that second step and therefore be able to kind of enlarge the group at a later date.
One quick question.
Oh, one more?
Yeah.
Go ahead, yeah.
Did you find any states that weren't at all being satisfied by the current roster that will be used for youth development?
So we didn't find that. What we did find is that some are being served better than others, obviously, right? So, and that's about kind of breaking out every single program by that original need state map, which we're also in the process of doing, to really determine kind of where they fit on the scale. Drama is a perfect example, right? So that was one of the need states that we saw. But every show delivers drama differently, and I don't know that people would think about TLC as a network that delivers on drama, but we do, and there are varying states of drama. So a show like 90 Day Fiancé obviously is going to be very, very high on the drama scale, whereas a show like Long Lost Family might not be as high, but it's a different type of drama. So there were the different types, but also the execution being higher or lower.
Terrific.
I hear the applause from sorry, but I've been told my #1 job is to keep it. I'm sure you guys will be available for more.
For sure.
We have a little more information on, if you want to hear more about the methodology, we have a little one-pager if you want that as well. So.
Thank you.